Um, of course, no worries if you're not feeling like coming on camera, but you are always welcome. We're probably going to give folks another couple of minutes to trickle in, but make yourselves comfortable. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. I'm Julia. I will introduce myself again in a couple of minutes. And I don't know, happy Thursday, everybody. I think it's Thursday for everyone here.
And an invitation if people just want to drop in the chat, like, where are you from and what are you looking forward to at today's meeting? What do you want to take away from today? Something like that will give us something to focus on. Y'all get to shape the meeting a bit for us.
Copenhagen, Mexico City, Venezuela, Barcelona. Wow.
Amazing.
Welcome, everybody.
Oh, Calgary.
Kind of makes me wonder, where's everybody from the US here? Are they not paying attention?
We've got at least three of us Teal teamers in the U.S. We'll try to represent.
That we're holding down the fort.
There's Rebecca.
Okay, Rebecca, yay. Clive from the UK. Clive gets the prize for being the first one today. He was on it.
Yeah, Clive saw the behind the scenes as we were getting ready. Well, what do you think, guys? Should we get moving?
I think
Good
so.
movie.
Let's do it. Okay. Welcome to the October version installment of the America's Global Teal Meetup. My name is Julia Markish. My pronouns are she, her. I am very honored to be your host for today, along with a whole collection of teal teamers that will introduce themselves as they come on stage. But let's take a look at our agenda. Hopefully, y'all know that today is a Nora, if you could move to the next slide. Today is a really special and exciting day because we are unveiling the Teal Landscape report for 2024. This is an absolute labor of love from a group of the Teal team members that are here today. And so we'll be going through that in some detail, asking questions, getting your input and asking for your questions. But before that, we're going to do, as usual, a quick teal primer just to get everybody on the same page on what exactly we mean when we say teal. And then we'll do some share outs and breakouts after the teal team report. So I am going to pass it on to my dear friend, Ed, to prime us on what teal is.
Thanks, Julia, and welcome, everybody. It's exciting to see folks from all over the world here. So the three pillars of teal, and then you might see that in the small font here, it says, according to Laloux. That's Frederick Laloux, who wrote the book Reinventing Organizations 10 years ago, which is a milestone we're celebrating today with the report we're going to talk about. And that book really touched my soul as a person who'd been writing about and studying workplace culture and business strategy for several years, basically 2 decades as a journalist and researcher. And there are three pillars that Laloux pointed to understand these evolving companies that were more soulful, as he put it. And he identified the first one, or one of the first ones you see here, the evolutionary purpose. So in other words, these are companies that are not only purpose driven rather than purely profit driven, but there's a sense that there's a regular feeling into what is the company called to do next. This relates not only to kind of business opportunity, but also in a sense obligation. What is our mission and how is it changing over time as circumstances change? The second pillar you see here is wholeness. And this refers to the way in which at these organizations, we are allowed to bring all of ourselves to work. Our various identities, say demographic type of identities, but also our spirit, our sense of the soul, and our authentic truth, which could include doubts at times. We don't have to put on a mask when we come to work, and our company also feels in tune with the entire planet, not just out there trying to increase the bottom line. And then self-management, and that's one we're going to really home in on to today. What we're talking about here is a more flat approach to work, a flatter approach to decision making, decentralizing how authority operates. And one example that I'll mention here that is exciting to us that we highlight in our new report is Bayer, the giant pharmaceutical company that famously invented aspirin. Has taken a lot of headaches away, and now they're trying to take away headaches for a lot of their employees, and maybe for more of humanity, because they've launched a massive experiment in self-management. This past year, they said they're going to reduce their management layers dramatically and invite 100,000 employees to manage themselves in smaller teams. And this is quite a shift for a big organization. So many organizations get very bureaucratic and sclerotic, you could say, as they have those pyramid structures that really require a lot of approvals from those at the top of the pyramid. Bayer is moving more toward a pancake where employees are asked to kind of make decisions themselves. And some early experiments at Bayer have been really promising. One group that was an early adopter of this self-management approach is their consumer health team based in South Asia. And they found in just 2 months that they were accelerating their launch dates significantly. They were also shortening the processes that they required internally, and their value was increasing by like 30% for the unit, which was represented, I believe, I'm going to make sure I got the statistic right. So one moment, please, while I check. By fact, it was for a value of about 2 million euros. So significant money saved here. And what this shows to me is that the power of self-management, the power of more democratic operations in organizations. These not only enhance the dignity of people in these organizations who feel like they have some authority and are not infantilized as adults, but also helps with agility. It enables greater speed of decision making as people closest to the work can make these choices and make calls, and it increases innovation. So we'll talk more about these pillars over time, and I think we're going to ask you to think about how they may be applying to your life. So back to you, Julia, for our next phase here.
And that was such an inspirational story of Bayer. And I knew kind of like the overall situation there, but to hear the actual data, to hear that things are working real time is such a delight. Welcome to the folks that are trickling in. We just had our Teal primer from Ed. We're going to move on to a reflection and connection that Matt, another Teal team member, is going to, and also friend, is going to introduce us to. So over to you, Matt, and thank you, Ed.
Hey, everybody. Matt Spohr here from San Francisco. So we're going to take 10 minutes to meet and greet one another and break a little ice here. So you'll land in a breakout room in a moment, and you'll have 10 minutes in there. So once you're in there, briefly introduce yourself. I know there's some familiar faces, but there's also some unfamiliar faces here. So it'll be nice for folks to make some new connections. Introduce yourself by giving your name, role, however you want to interpret that, work role, life role, planetary warrior role, however you want to go, a little bit more about where you're coming from. And then share an example you've seen recently in your daily life of self-management, wholeness, or purpose. Could be on the job, could not be on the job. We're just looking for those, as we call them, in the wild examples. So I think Nora is going to drop you into a breakout and we'll meet each other for 10 minutes.
Doug, good to see you. Nora.
Hi.
Hello, Susan. Nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you.
How's everybody doing today?
Well,
Good, thank you.
running late.
You all know each other or what?
I know Doug and Nora, but I don't think they've met, but I could be wrong.
Nope.
Not yet. You're right.
Who
And
wants to kick us off? Maybe whoever's got the longest hair? It's going to be either Nora or Susan.
Susan, I think I win.
I think so.
So hi everyone, my name is Nora. I'm dialing in from Berlin. Berlin is currently experiencing lots of sunshine and a beautiful autumn, so I'm feeling super uplifted. And my role is, I think, quite similar to Travis's role. I absolutely am passionate about the future of work, and I love to be a partner on the journey to exploring new ways of working, thinking, and being. So, yeah, whatever you want to call that role, a partner in crime, a partner for the journey, yeah, organizational designer, something around that. And it's really nice to meet you and to see you again, Travis. And I'll pass it on to the person with the next long hair. So that would be Susan.
So that would be me. So hello everyone, I'm Susanna and it's my first time here. So I just picked it up on LinkedIn 2 days ago. So happy to be here. I work today as a coach and workshop facilitator. I have a long corporate background, 28 years in the traditional big corporations, and just had to leave it last year and said I need something else, something new. I've been a leader for many years, and I always was very value based. But then, of course, when I read Laloux's book, I understood that that's where I am. But then I felt that I needed to go even more. So also in the business I have now that I'm running together with a co-founder, we focus very much on self-management and yeah, Laloux's the Teal principles in general. So that's my daily job now.
And are you based in Copenhagen?
I'm based in Copenhagen. We're both in Copenhagen, yes, but we are very much, I mean, reaching out to my co-founder is English by origin. So, and we're working globally. We're working at the moment with an English company. So there are of course coming or being in Scandinavia, the hierarchies here are flatter than most other places. But there's still not so many self-managed companies. There are some, and of course we're building that network also locally. But we are looking to the world more. Because that's, yeah, it's much more fun and much more interesting.
Nice.
So super nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Yeah, pleasure.
So
Glad you're
now-
here. Doug, do you want to kick it off next?
Sure. So I just have to say I'm so excited to be popping in today because I've been wanting to participate, but huge changes happened in my life. And my husband, myself, my daughter were living in Boston, and a random opportunity came up. And within a few months, we are now living in San Francisco.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I love it here.
Oh!
Like,
Exciting.
yeah, this smile is just, yeah, we arrived, we pulled in, we drove across country, we pulled in on August 3rd and got kiddo into school, and I'm giving you my life story, but got kiddo into school and are about to close on a house, which is crazy because it's happened so like in a week. We found a place, had an offer accepted, and our closing is November 7th. And apparently this doesn't happen in the San Francisco market. And we're not loaded either. Like, we're not ballers, but I'm just saying, it worked out. So in terms of my roles, as a partner to my husband, father to my daughter, and I am also a licensed mental health clinician, and I specialize in treating trauma. which essentially is helping folks manage stress inside their system. And I'm also an executive self-leadership coach. And I am, I mean, if I'm honest, I'm just still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, besides just have fun, helping others learn themselves better. I think that's a nice way of putting it. So I think there was like a third question there, an example of self-management, wholeness, and leadership. And I just got off a call with my coach, and the thing that I want to just share is that I've been really trying to get this down for myself because I'm an experiential learner. And I feel that with the amount of transition that's happened in my life in the past year, I feel like the idea of self-management has been really going well. So the idea of listening from the inside out, it really works so wonderfully well. And so I'll hit pause there, but there's a lot of joy just in this exciting journey that we're on. And I'll pass it off to you, Travis.
I'll be back in San Francisco in 3 weeks, so we'll
Let's hook
definitely
up.
have to grab coffee or a beer.
I'd love that.
Yeah, I want to hear how this crazy story unfolded. For sure. I'm like so
Yes,
intrigued. And it's like everything I can do not to just pepper you with
sure.
questions right now.
Well, let's get together.
Yeah.
And Nora and Suzanne come visit.
Yes.
We will, maybe not very soon, but at some point we will.
Yeah, Suzanne, I'll actually be in Copenhagen soon, so
You
might
have
be
to reach.
a nice opportunity.
Let me know. I will note down. We will connect, and then you have to let me know. I have an office very central Copenhagen, so yeah, absolutely.
The world can be so small.
It is. It is.
Especially the Tealy world.
Good
Yeah,
point.
if I could say something, I mean, because as I didn't say when we founded this company, but it's only what is it now, 2 months ago that we co-founded this, focusing very much on teal. And I have to say, all the people we've met in this community ever since, it's such an open community, such a welcoming. I mean, I just couldn't imagine people that we never ever met. They just get on a call and tell us about what they know and where we should look and how to get started. It's fantastic. It's really not. I mean, I've been, as I said, I've been working in global corporations. Of course, there you could always reach out to people, but I never met the same kind of warm welcome that I've met now from or seen from so many people. That's fantastic. It's really a special community.
Like deeply agreed, and it feels like such critical life skills that people get, that like you learn all through kindergarten and grade school, and then you have to consciously unlearn the if you go into a really corporate world, and then people like lose those kindergarten skills after practicing of avoiding them. And like, so my kind of teal in the wild is, I will try not to make this depressing, but like there's been a lot of funerals and people passing in my life, but some of them have been amazing, where people have come together and they have very different ideas, and they can like collaborate to really honor the other person. And some have been just tragedies, like watching unfold, because people try and say, well, no, I have authority and I'm allowed to make this decision. And like that place where anybody can say no and ruin the experience for lots of other people, that to me is one of the things that like we're working on fixing, all of us together in all of our different ways, right? Like so many more people need these skills if, well, if our kids are gonna have any chance of a life that doesn't suck, is what's the other piece that's energizing me, because I've got a daughter that's just a year and a half. That's just the light of my life. And it became very, very visceral on like all of these ideas and how they need to be enacted. And so it's brought new excitement and joy to the work that I do with like CEOs and founders and all that sort of stuff. And One piece that I'm doing now that Doug Nora, I think is new since we talked less, is like, I think I'm going to buy a business like Chrysos is not, I think I'm going to buy a business like Chrysos is doing. Like
Yeah.
I've looked at 100 of them. I've put in offers on a couple. It will happen at some point. Probably 6 to 12 months, but that is that like I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is about how this stuff works. So that's the newest.
Way
Fantastic.
to work. Yeah,
That's awesome. Yes. I love these new toys they embedded in the programming.
that's super exciting, Travis. Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It is actually like partnering with a company that's in the Bay Area, Oberon. It's a co-op conglomerate. Doug, just so you
Cool.
know, because they're local to you.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Fantastic.
Nice.
I'll see you all back in the main.
Here's everybody.
Okay, welcome back. I don't know about you all, but I'm just like glowing with excitement and happiness after meeting the folks in my breakout group. And it's just so nice to hear people living teal and working in teal ways and being excited about the same things that I'm excited about. So I hope you're all also glowing. Um, and with that, thanks, Tori. I don't know what that is, but cool. Um, let's shall we move on to our big reveal? Oh, cool. Well, everybody in Tori's breakout group got something extra special. That's nice.
I'll share with you. This is Tori's attempt to kind of integrate Teal and put in his own language for operating an organization. Is that a fair way to paraphrase it, Tori? The simple open venture.
The simple open venture, yeah, it's my own concept for how you could run a teal venture, and then the vision is just that's what I'm running right now as a nonprofit, and it's not large enough to be doing organizational concepts, but yeah, those are the two. But you can see the evolutionary vision in the evolutionary purpose in the vision statement.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing with all of us, Tori. Okay, Nora Lead, if you can push us over to the next slide. It is my great honor and excitement to introduce to the stage Ed and Travis and Matt, who are the three fearless leaders of the Teal team, who, and I shared this with my breakout group, these three are the epitome for self-management within a self-managed organization that came to mind for me to answer that question, because they truly just they recognized the need for something like a Teal Landscape report, and they took it up, the three of them, with so much gusto and so much real passion and purpose. And they're a subset of the Teal team, and they're just spearheading this incredible project for the second year running. And I'm just really glad that they're doing it, and that you guys are creating so much value for the world. And I get to watch it from the sidelines and cheer you on and ask you lots of questions along the way. So without further ado, please take over. Tell me to stop talking and tell us about the Teal Landscape Report for 2024.
Is this me jumping in here, Ed Matt? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
seeing some
Yeah.
thumbs up, so that's great.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for the intro, Julia. As she was mentioning, this is the second time we've tried to pull together like an official landscape report, thanks to the inspiration from Matt's marketing genius that putting something out in physical, tangible form would be hopefully useful for the community. This is, I don't know, the 10th time that I've tried to organize and be a part of a group trying to say like, how many teal companies are out there? And like what exactly even is teal? And like why have I been silly enough to do this like over and over again? Well, mostly because I don't learn my lesson. But the lesson that I'm trying to learn that just won't be learned is like, is this thing actually a thing? And if is it going somewhere or not? And like, I can't stop wanting to know that. And I know I'm not the only one. Like, and how does this relate to some of the other movements, conscious capitalism and B Corp and regenerative, and does this movement know about itself? Would it define itself with this teal label? And all of those things are kind of like it depends. And I think that's why I can't stop myself from keeping to do this over and over again. And Nora, if you can pop to the next slide. The thing like some of our questions and what we were diving to this time defined like a new source of rigor that we wanted to bring when we were researching this. So the sources that we used last time around was were similar, like books that are written on teal, whether it be from corporate rebels or one of the other couple of books that I helped write, like including like Lead Together. But we found new things like liberated companies and World Blue, and we did more thorough parsing of the Enlivening Edge and corporate rebels, and like we were especially looking for companies that were listed in more than one place or had something that really stood out as supporting one of the tillers of appeal of teal, the pillars of teal. And we're also looking to see. Um, we had this sense and got some feedback, and this matches my intuition as well. Is that like teal is much easier to do at 10 or 15 person organization than it is at 50 or 500 or 5,000. I often find myself saying if you're not running a Tealy sort of organization at 10 or 15, you're either a jerk or you've got some massive trauma. Um, but larger than that, like you do need something that's got more structure. And so we ended up with like like three times as many companies over 50 people in this report that we included, and that was really the focus on what we were doing, and then a lot of other stuff on more data gathering, etc. So those were the big things. But I think the movement cycle also talks a lot on like why I've been kind of having similar questions over the last 10 years. And for that, maybe I can hand it over to Matt to talk through that. So
Yeah.
Nori, you pop to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Matt.
Yeah, before we dive into this, I do want to say one thing that, and Travis really found the numbers to put a finer point on that, that three times as many companies over 50. When we started this version 2, we knew we wanted to be more rigorous, aim bigger, take this to the next level. But in doing so, we weren't sure we were going to find more companies or enough companies of a certain size in order to do this sort of meta-analysis. So the fact that we did it was very encouraging. And also the fact that this report has 229 companies in it. Our database now probably has 4 times as many. Those aren't fully vetted yet. They don't have the full data set that we needed to do this analysis. But the fact that they're out there, and you'll see in a moment through this slide and other slide, that there's momentum to this is very encouraging. So one thing we wanted to do in this, since it is 10 years since Reinventing Organizations came out, we wanted to take some sort of bigger timeline reflective look at the movement. We found this framework from somebody called the Movement Lab, and they call this the movement cycle. So if you look at a movement over time, as this graph does, it goes through certain emotional states. You start with an enduring crisis over there on the left-hand side, which comes to some sort of inflection point between that and an uprising movement where there's been a change, there's momentum going in a certain direction. People are, potentially excited about that. You hit a peak, and then there's usually some sort of contraction. I kind of view this for us, and we'll get into it in more detail, sort of choppiness, uncertainty, stuff has finally hit the road and become real. So how do we make sense of all of that? Which gets you to an evolutionary phase, and then you finally hit a new normal. So when we looked back at certain milestones that we've seen, we see this enduring crisis, probably since the beginning of time, that management has been bad. Organizations have been draining on people. I have a friend who jokes that the only things certain in life are death, taxes, and bad management. And so at least recently, that all came to a head in 2008 in the Great Recession. There was just economic turmoil, which led to probably a lot of personal turmoil too. Not just, I lost my job in the Great Recession. Raise your hand if you did. I did. But what am I doing if the job like that? And Mark, you're right on. This looks a lot like Gartner's hype cycle. We thought about that too. Gartner has much more copyright lawyers, and so we decided to go with this frame instead. Erica, sorry, we'll see you soon, but nice to see you again. So coming out of that Great Recession, what happened? Well, the things we saw were in 2010, Inspiral started, and Inspiral has a lot of this framework around color-coded levels of consciousness and how that appears in the real world. That was 2010. 2012, Spotify went to a self-management scheme of guilds, as they called it. In 2013, Zappos adopted holacracy. And Zappos was, even before this, a very visible company on their own. They were very visible after they got acquired by Amazon as well. So this was all a very uprising of visible companies moving towards this state of purpose, self-management, and wholeness, which culminated in Frederick Allude doing the research and publishing the book for Reinventing Organizations. How many here went to the 10-year anniversary party for Reinventing Organizations recently? Okay, we saw a few people there. It was interesting. Frederick said in that when he was doing the book, researching it during this uprising time, he struggled to find 12 solid companies that he could document in his book. And so, not that we're doing anything nearly as what he's done, but the fact that 10 years later, we can identify hundreds that are moving in this direction, even with our, frankly, volunteer, self-organized, unpaid effort to do this is very encouraging. And I will say, in addition to the people here, we had Esther and Anthony working on this as well. They did a lot of the work for us from the human first work side. So thanks to them. But it's interesting, right after you see the 2014 publication, stuff starts going sideways a little bit. Zappos kind of backslides a little bit. So does Buffer. Buffer's a social media management company who was very big on transparency and self-management, but then sort of took a step back in 2015. In 2016, Medium, another online company, dropped holacracy. Haier bought GE, which is kind of cool. Haier is a very big Chinese appliance company who's been doing self-management for quite a while. And we saw the distributed autonomous organization movement started, which is potentially like a splinter movement or a counter movement to this. So again, some choppiness. In 2018, Zappos dropped holacracy altogether. Microsoft bought GitHub, which sort of took GitHub off the field here. So you can see some contraction, some choppiness, and then, yeah, COVID happened. It's also interesting that right around COVID is when the Teal team started. We didn't stick that on there, but it is a funny thing. You can see Roche adopted self-management, and Teal team did some presentations to Roche around that time, 2019. Last year, EY acquired Life Sciences, the people who organize Teal around the world. So that's off the table for the moment, which is unfortunate. We hope they come back. And we've seen some very management heavy-handed tactics around thou shalt return to office mandates, which to me is the complete opposite of Teal. Let's figure this out. Let's organize around the new reality. And then we mentioned Bear, of course, is moving towards this evolution. Bear is getting rid of managers. A lot of it was couched as cost saving, which is honest, I guess, but maybe not the best motivation. They also mentioned innovation, which is good. So that's quite a whirlwind. I probably spent more time on that than I wanted. But that's how we see things going. So it's been choppy. I guess the one other point we wanted to make, and Travis alluded to this a bit, Teal looks different, and I'll get to your question, Clive, in a moment. Teal looks different at different organizations based on their size, their industry, their individual culture, their history. I know in lots of movements, not just this movement, there's sort of a draw towards purity. You know, are these people really purely Teal? What are they doing? And we tried to avoid that in this report, to acknowledge that somebody doing Teal at 500 people is different than at 5,000 people. And purity is not going to necessarily help us understand and reflect the movement, what's actually going on out there. So while we did focus on those three pillars, we were pretty open to how people were actually implementing those. So let me hop in. Clive, was COVID a breakthrough event for self-organizing? I think so. It could be. I think a lot of companies self-organized in the moment. Last year's report, we talked about Rise, which was a staffing company that completely changed their business model because of COVID and managed to triple the size of their company and their revenues because of it. I think the real test, and again, you know, this movement impulse, once people got out of COVID, did they stick with that, or did they revert to the old thou shalt return to the office? Did they contract? Did they backslide? So yeah, I think if you drew this graph 5 years from now, you might put COVID where we have Great Recession instead. This is all open to interpretation. All right, enough on that. Let's pop to the next one, and we'll start getting into the actual data here. Okay. Yeah. There's a strong backlash, definitely, and Thomas, and that may be part of people feel more empowered to actually push back on these things, seeing that companies did pretty well, a lot of them during the pandemic when they adapted. So one thing we kind of pioneered in last report, and we continued in this one, is creating what we call the company formation timeline. So if you took the age of the company and you did a little math, you can figure out when they started, and then you can plot that on a graph and see what is the trend for these companies starting over time. We started this graph in 1954, which is reaching back 70 years, which is the upper bound of our time age in our data set. But we cut it off, excuse me, in 2014, 10 years ago, because it takes time for companies to get to that 50-person, $5 million threshold. So we wanted to not include that choppiness at the end here. And what you see is, it's allergy season here in the Bay Area. I don't know if you other Bay Area people are experiencing that, but I definitely have that going on. Apologies. What you can see in this graph is there's a dividing line in the math between before 1989 and after 1989. So, which is halfway through pretty much this graph. But the second half of the graph has twice as many companies starting as the left side, which is momentum, right? There's, excuse me, it's roughly like 70 before 1989 and 150 afterwards, if you think of 1/3, 2/3. And if you look in the last 20 years, so take a line from 2004 to 2014, excuse me, the last 10 years of this, you see a whole bunch of companies. So because it's all piled up on that end, that shows you visually there's momentum for this picking up. You see a whole slug of companies that have started in that time. And our inflection point was right about here, 2008, 2009 for the Great Recession. So, obviously that didn't put a dent in things. People kept making these companies. We looked at this across three geographical areas: Europe, North America, and a geography we called multinational. We defined multinational as a company that had significant presence and or facilities on more than one continent. And that's different than a global company, which may have people around the globe, but they may have significant presence in one place. So that's how we divided that. Multinational actually turned out to be our largest region when we added this now. And they're this lighter color. And you can see that, there was a big multinational spike in the mid 90s, but then starting in 2000, there's another big clump of it right there. Europe, on the other hand, is the blue line here. I hope these colors are coming through for you. But you can see Europe starting in 1969, 1970 has been a pretty strong, continuous upward trend, which is great. And then there's, North America. We're 10 years behind them. Starting in 79, we try to have an upward trend. Took a big jump in 99, but we're still playing catch up. And I think the fact that this is the Teal Meetup for the Americas, and yet we see a lot of Europeans here, kind of tells you a little bit about what's going on geographically. But I think the thing to take away from this is momentum. I think there is a lot of momentum that we found in this data set for teal companies. Let's jump to the next one. So one of our data points is how many employees are in a company, and we've broken it down, starting from 50 to 200, then 200 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000, and above 10,000. It's interesting that there's a little bit of a valley at 5 to 10,000. I'm not sure why that is. Most of our companies are still that small, 50 to 200. But the interesting math we did on this is if you take the median value for each of those employee bands and you multiply it by the number of companies in each band, and then you add that all up, you get a number that's 551,805 to be exact. So this report covers an estimate of over 500,000 employees who are living some version of the Teal organization. To me, that's an astounding number. I don't think anybody would have thought of that just from this small of a data set. And we didn't inflate it at the top end either. For that 10,000 plus group, we used 10,001. We didn't speculate it would be like 10,000 to 1,000,000, and we're going to take 250,000 as the median value. We just went for the lowest value there. So that tells me that there are a number of folks out there who are actually doing this day to day. Maybe messy, maybe hard. It may not look like their neighbor and how their neighbor is doing it, but they're out there doing it. And again, that's along with momentum, just the sheer scale of this was encouraging to me. We wanted to go for scale, and we found it in this report. So very happy about that. Let's hop to the last last data section here. And this is just a highlight again of what's in the report. There's a whole lot more than this. I'll admit in version 1 of the report, we did not do as good a job as I would have liked of sectioning or segmenting companies into their industries. There's a system called NAICS, which is what Wall Street and banks and the government use to classify industries. So I thought we should use that too, like line up with things that are there. We did a better job this time of being real sticklers about this, which changed sort of the ranking of here of groups. And you can see that professional, scientific, and technical services, that's the part that gets cut off there, is the clear winner. They're over 100 out of the 229 companies in the report. That's a big chunk. It's not surprising. Those companies are very people and tech intensive, and we think those are two things that lend themselves to being Teal companies. Interestingly, that manufacturing is number 2, which is experiencing, depending on how you look at it, either they're stuck in the orange command and control past, and they're very autocratic, and they're very scheduled, or they're moving into the whole lean methodology, AI and automation, getting rid of people is the other story that you hear about in manufacturing. So the fact that manufacturing is a solid number 2 in this industry breakdown, to me, is very surprising. Retail, finance, and information round out the top 5. Those are pretty people and tech heavy as well. I'm surprised that entertainment and education, which are also tech and people heavy, aren't as prevalent in our breakdown. I would have expected more of those companies to be here. So just some surprising distribution. And in the report, you can see industries by geography, industries by age. We break it down that way as well. Which leads us all to the final picture that we'll share from this report. And this is sort of this was the inspiration for this whole effort to begin with. We put together a slide of, here's the Teal landscape from our report for 2024. This is most of the companies in the data set organized by their industry. And you can see, the boxes are also representational of how many people or how many companies were in the report. So professional services gets the biggest box, manufacturing gets the second biggest box, and so on. This is where we started. We realized a couple of years ago, there was no picture like this of Teal. You can find this sort of picture from consulting companies for almost any other industry out there. But as a movement, couldn't really find that. So we put this all together. Unfortunately, we couldn't fit all of the professional, scientific, and technical services companies on here. One slide just doesn't do it justice. You either would lose others, or you would get logos so small they wouldn't be readable or clickable. And in this report, another thing we did, all of these are clickable. You can get the report, click on a logo, and hop to that company's website and learn more about what they're doing. So I have no idea what we allotted for in time on this, but that's our quick overview of what's in the landscape for 2024. So let's do a little Q&A here about this, and maybe I can stop yakking so much. Let's not do breakouts yet. Let's just, maybe we turn off the slides for a moment.
Thanks, Matt. As I have questions, please feel free also to put your own questions in the chat. Would love to hear what's on your mind, hear what has bubbled up. They can be thoughts, they don't have to be questions, but for the team to respond to. But my first one is more along the lines of and Matt, you mentioned some of the surprises that you came upon in the industry breakdown. I'm curious, what other surprises were there in this version, in this edition of the Teal Landscape, if there were any?
Well, one of them we mentioned also earlier was, could we find enough companies at the scale we wanted? Like we weren't sure. So we were surprised that not only could we, that was a pretty big one. I think there's also the manufacturing. If you drill into other parts of the report, manufacturing continues to be a very surprising sector. We found this last time and it continued into this time. There's manufacturing companies that are 70 years old that have 10,000 employees that have been doing self-management for a long time, which, I know we talk about the movement and 10 years of Teal, but this really, like any movement, it has antecedents in the past. And being able to drill into that and see that this movement, even though it's tech and people heavy, has strong roots in manufacturing is surprising.
Yeah.
I'll pick up on that point in terms of the sort of like trajectory point. And the surprise for me, a big surprise for me, Julia, was the way in which the combination of our data that largely, Matt and Travis and his team at Human First Works were compiling, and then finding this graphic on movements from Movement Net Lab, it just kind of really resonated with me and helped me understand my own kind of frustration that we haven't seen this teal movement take off faster, because this, Lalou's book just really touched a nerve for me, and I was like, woo, everyone's going to do this. This was the best thing since sliced bread. And it hasn't, but then this is like reassuring for me to see that there's a quiet momentum, that there is still a need and a call for these kinds of more soulful organizations, maybe boosted by the pandemic, as someone mentioned in the chat. And I think it's neat to be able to try to have a report that fleshes that sense out a little bit, that this is still working. It's just maybe not as visible, and we're actually heading in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to think about, and this actually resonates very much with one of the folks in my breakout group at the very beginning. It's interesting to think about how this movement wasn't started by Lalou. It was given vocabulary for all of us to be able to exchange ideas maybe a little bit more easily about it, but it was started well before. Like Lalou would have had nothing to write about if it hadn't. So yeah, it's cool to think about how it's been building for a lot longer than any probably of us have known about it.
I want to touch on something in the chat here. Clive and Thomas are talking about sort of what kind of person can operate in a teal environment, and then on the flip side of that, how can organizations attract those people if those are the workers they want? And I think it's interesting. Maybe you guys want to weigh in. I can blab about that, but do you, Thomas or Clive, do you guys want to talk about that?
I can jump in. I don't know if Clive wanted to say anything.
After you.
I can go. Why don't you go first, Clive?
Okay. I was really pleased to see the timeline on your graph, because I first met self-organizing in the Reynolds Metals startup in 1970. And we had a 3-layer organization. And we recruited the best talent for the startup, and it worked quite well. So, but we found that with time, as the challenge changed, we flipped from having talent that was bigger and greater than the challenge to the point where we didn't evolve enough. And I call it, we suffered from participationitis. It's like appendicitis, And it hurts when it goes too far to the point where the guys in the teams couldn't cope with the level of challenge that was increasing. That's all from me.
And actually, Clive, before you take off, is that what you mean about a higher level of think power, where the think power didn't meet the challenge that the company was facing?
Got it. We've worked on 23 startups, greenfields, and on all of those projects, we've work analyzed, we've tested, and we've matched the think power of the recruits to the job specs. We've applied similar concepts to existing organizations, where we've looked at the talent existing in the team to see the potential for them to self-organize. So we've got quite a bit of experience in that, but the key is, and thinking Teal 3 years from now, when the dynamics of work have become more complex and challenging, then the organization has to progress its talent to the point where it can cope with more work.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear from, well, before I start adding more complexity to the conversation, Thomas, did you want to add some thoughts to the think
Sure. So yeah, so thank you, Clive, for that. I feel like your segue, whether conscious or not, Julia, was spot on. Complexity. So my mind goes to complexity theory, where if we're analyzing something versus probing and sensing. So for me, as a somatic coach, leadership falls on the complex side of things, not the complicated side of things. And I feel like where the world is going, what the world needs, and what Teal offers as a possibility is that how to bake in, how to build an organization that thrives in complexity. And so for me, is it just somebody's ability to think linearly within a certain structure, or is it the ability of someone to think non-linearly and also have an emotional maturity that enables them to understand how they're showing up under pressure so that they can work more strongly together? And that's a lot of what I do in my work as a somatic coach. So is how do we show up under pressure? How do we manage that? What are the stories that are running behind us? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a PhD or, what name your degree. It's just that how do you cultivate that in the people that you're hiring? How does that get baked in? And this, expands the conversation into education and how you're cultivating certain traits or certain skills, both personal and emotional.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that complexity isn't just along the dimension of being able to think at higher levels or process information more quickly or connect dots, but there are other dimensions, the emotional dimension being very high ranking among them, that also requires a more complex approach or just a more focused approach. In the complexity of today's world.
Yes, and just not to get too sidetracked, but just in terms of what David Snowden demonstrates within the Cynefin framework, there's like when you're struggling with new elements, new things moving forward, you're probing and you're sensing and like, okay, so what is this data telling us rather than analyzing data into a framework that's already been selected and you're just dumping it in, right? So that's the biggest difference between leadership, which is much more akin to parenting, versus subject matter expertise. And
Mhm.
so that's having that shift as a society, as an organization, as an individual, I think is key.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me
I,
think.
I have Dave Snowden's book on my shelf, and I've followed his work quite a lot. Okay, but Dave's work has evolved from problem solving, and I don't believe yet he's got a grip on group dynamics and how and what the structural and emotional context is for self-organizing to work. Not many people have been there, and I think Dave's off the pace in that context.
I appreciate that reflection, Clive. Thank you for sharing that.
Um, Thank you both. Really appreciate the thoughts here. And yeah, I want to connect what you were just saying back to one of the questions in the chat that I think might be interesting to continue our live conversation about, which is a lot of the points that you both just brought up, Clive and Thomas, are around like the day-to-day actions, the day-to-day decision making powers, the connection that happens within an organization that sometimes isn't very easy to relate, or sometimes is easier to talk about than to actually do. And so I want to bring it back to our Teal team friends who worked on this report. How are you thinking about creating this landscape with the information that you have, which is mostly about what companies say about themselves versus what they're actually living out on a day-to-day, on the day-to-day?
I would suggest, Travis, you take the first pass at that as the guy most in charge of the data.
No, I know it's interesting. We were talking chatting a little bit about this in the chat that it goes on both sides, right? Like it's easy to see organizations that are very like actually when I talk to a lot of CEOs and I was like, oh hey, we're talking gathering a self-managed report. I hear a lot of them say, yeah, yep, that's definitely us. We have OKRs and people know what they're supposed to work on, so they can go manage themselves to their little slice of the goal, and that's what we want them to do. By golly, and I'm like, oh, that's adorable that we are not talking about the same thing at all. And then on the other side, I see companies that are very, very cutting edge, that are very humble. I think about like Raise Recruiting, like, oh my gosh, we've got such a long way to go. Like we're never gonna get even a quarter of the way that we're there. And like, but like of course, like the team does all that hiring and firing. People set their own salaries. There are no bosses. There are no privileges. We are completely transparent with our strategy and our pricing, and all the customers can see any of that at any point in time. And like, oh, but we've got so far to go. And so seeing both of those things at the same time is quite fascinating. Though I think the there are some things that are kind of unmistakable hallmarks. And transparency is especially one of those. My like the transparency around salary is personally the barometer that I use the most. Um, and it's the one where like anybody that is doing less than I'm doing around transparency around financials is missing the boat on what's possible. And anybody that's doing more is crazy and doesn't understand human nature. And I just love that dichotomy that I see in talking to people. Like everybody is very convinced that wherever they are at on the ladder is the only reasonable place to be. And so the humility that I see the best organizations approach this with, and the questions is, I think, where most of the interesting learning happens. Um, and that transparency around the financials is also the easiest place for us to get a real vibe or sense. And so when people are talking about the transformation that they're doing, when they show real data in their talks and that sort of stuff, it becomes quite easy after seeing a few to slot them one way or another. At least that's how it feels for me.
I'll jump in on that. Mark, you're right that we're going off of what people say. It's very external evidence. We would love to do more, in person or even survey work to get more in depth. I would point to Corporate Rebels. They have done an amazing job in the last few months of publishing dozens and dozens of case studies about self-managing companies. We would we would love to get there. We're not Corporate Rebels, right? We don't have their staff, their business model, their money to dedicate towards this. And to toot our own horn for a moment, they just started doing this sort of meta-analysis work. They've asked people to join their database, and we've had some discussions with them. And I think it's just more people doing this sort of work of documenting the movement and showing it to itself and encouraging people that way, the better. So, yes, and.
Yeah, it feels kind of like a self-building situation where the more you get people raising their hands, the more you're able to then dive in and have that exchange with them. But without the hand raising, it's really hard to just knock on every door and be like, "Hi, I'm from the Teal team. Have you heard of us?"
Exactly.
I'm curious, and maybe this can be our last question. Where do you see the Teal movement heading? I know we've got that curve, and hopefully it's gonna like keep ebbing and flowing on an upward trajectory. That's what I hope you will say. But after doing another round of this report, what are you hopeful about in the coming year or the coming few years? What challenges do you foresee, team?
I'll jump in. And I know folks mentioned this here. I'm actually hopeful that workers are pushing back on return to office mandates, even to the point of voting with their feet, that they feel like there's a better thing out there than just being commanded to do stuff. To me, that I know that's a big decision for people to make. I'm going to leave my senior job because of the way I'm being treated. And it's usually senior people who do leave in that situation, from what I've seen. But that makes me think that people believe there's enough betterness out there that they can go find something that works for them. And I think this movement is part of that.
So
I'm going to get more woo-woo and than Matt's kind of practical mind, which they're both fit, I think. I kind of feel like we're in this phase of hope also. But I'm going to put it in terms of like we're in this process of hospicing the old and midwifing the new. It's a term I got from our other Teal team colleague, Liz Solomon, around this race between our potential to destroy ourselves as a human species and
Sorry,
the
Ed, could you
growing
hold on just 1 second? I'm not sure who it is, but if one of the hosts can mute everyone except for Ed, or yep, maybe that took care of it.
That's my best.
Go ahead.
No one else gets to talk. Kidding. Anyway, so I think I made my main point about how we're in this like inflection point. It's kind of cliche, but I do think this evidence of a quiet growth and desire for more soulful organizations is encouraging to me, and I think it's going to keep growing.
I mean, can we even talk about future trends without mentioning AI? I don't think you're allowed in 2024. And so, like, like I see a very clear ecosystem emerging, right? There was a lot of people that were raising their hands that are like Teal consultants or adjacents that were like would love to be on that list. The threshold of 50 people, it made that an easy decision because very few of them have that, but a lot of them are getting up there, 20, 30, 40 people. So some of them are definitely going to be making that list with uh EY buying life sciences and like these bigger conglomerates that are there. I think it's very clear that there's a purely capitalistic play to going towards Teal, and whether or not that's what Bayer is doing is like yet to be told. But I think we've got to be very cognizant of this group, right? Because there's a lot of coaches and consultants and people that are helping steward the movement forward on this going the other way of agile, where it becomes a bastardized version of itself and corrupted by the existing system. And so we need to find some ways of like staking out or things and like who's inside the circle and who's not. And how do people get invited in, but also how do people get kicked out? To me feels really critical because I think the next 10 years are fairly disruptive, to use an overused Silicon Valley term. And so I would like us to be a little bit more sharp elbowed for the greater good of our kids.
Yeah, make sure that none of the snake oil charlatan, like, oh, I have a new way of working, but it's actually just capitalism and sheep's clothing, um, doesn't get through. Doesn't,
Yeah, especially the extractive capitalism.
yeah, yeah. Okay, everyone has to be vigilant. And I also really appreciate what that you brought AI into the picture, because there is no talking about the future without talking about how AI is going to influence it. And just a really quick anecdote, I was at an event last week where a lot of executives of some really large companies were talking about what's keeping them up at night, and the conversation turned to AI. And what I was really heartened by is that these folks were talking mostly about how to keep their eye on the human ball of their company. Like, how do we make sure that with AI taking over so much of the tasks, that we can actually bring more humanity back into our teams and into the way that people work and think about their jobs and purpose. And so for me, it feels like AI is actually something that the Teal movement can harness in a really beautiful way. So I'll leave that there. But we want to hear from you, and we want you all to contribute to the conversation too. So we can go to the slide with our breakout question. That would be excellent. And yeah, we want y'all to kind of like contribute to this with your own experiences. So we're gonna go into a 10-minute breakout where you get to talk about either your own company or what you think the future of Teal looks like, and where we are on this movement cycle. So I'm just gonna pop these into the chat. Here we go. All right, so now you've got the questions in the chat, and we've got 10 minutes to go into our breakouts and have a conversation.
Nora, are you following me?
You got me.
Mhm.
All right. Oh, what a lovely background, Mark. Where are you at? The jungle?
It's just the reflection off of my window to the backyard of my house. Yeah, it's a kind of a forest that we lived in.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day today.
Awesome. All right, who would like to kick us off? The first person gets to choose which question we can dive in.
I've talked too much already, so somebody else can pick up the ball.
I really enjoyed your contributions, Clive. Thank you. Mark, how about you?
Sure. Yeah, Clive, it was very interesting your history in this whole space. It's a very important perspective that everything is built on the shoulders of something that came before, right? And that's a lot of all of the movements are that way. Travis and I just met last week, so I kind of shared this with him. My company, we're a small 10-person consulting firm that we've been around for about 13 years. And since the beginning, everything we've done has been, we're essentially a company made up of independent consultants that are under my company. And we've thrived for 13 years on a model where everybody's essentially an equal. We have a 100% transparent financial way of working. In other words, we when we go to try to get a new client, we work together. The team, essentially 99% of the time, the team that is going to deliver is the team that does the business development, essentially collaborates together on putting proposals together or responding to an RFP. We have a tool that we developed to essentially a Excel sheet on steroids with some pivot tables and programming that essentially says, okay, here are all the tasks that have to be done. Here's who's going to do everything. Here's everybody's rates, and everybody sees what everybody's going to make. Everybody sees what the company, the brand takes as a small fee to, as part of organizing that. And then once a project is won, there's usually a client lead, somebody who's responsible for managing the client relationship. And there might be a lead for other aspects, say a research lead and so forth and so on. But everybody's essentially just collaborating constantly together. It's a very small company, right? But we have been doing it this way since the beginning. I never heard of Teal until last week. I've heard of certainly holacracy and self-managed organizations. I have a going way back background early in my career in manufacturing, and self-managed organizations or self-managed teams when I was at General Electric was a thing. It was never scaled to the organizational level, never intended to scale to the organizational level. So yeah, that's my kind of personal experience and the experience that we have in our team. And yeah, so I'm in terms of that, the cycle was an interesting sort of graph to show the evolution. I would question the span of time, because Clive rightly mentioned it goes way back. But yeah, I mean, you guys started in 54 and went to 2024, so that's a pretty good. I also think it's quite interesting the spaces where it shows up, and I would really be interested. I know it's based on NAICS codes, and I know that that's a really blunt instrument to segment things up in. So I'd question some of maybe what's the most effective way of presenting the information aside from where you get the data for the information. But it's a great work of reporting that I think shows some interesting trends in progress. But sorry, I answered both of them. I'll shut up now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Nora, I'd be curious to get your perspective.
Absolutely. Which question on?
Um, either one. But I mean, I think for
Feel free.
the first one, it'd be more about companies you work with. So maybe more of the second.
Teal movement cycle. So that's an interesting one. I'm not sure the graph resonates with me for the reason that, as Frederick Laloux points out in his first chapter, there are stages of development. And within each phase, there is a kind of a cycle of its own, right? So you have these different cycles of cycles on different levels. So in that sense, it is inevitable that one cycle is currently coming to an end and a new one is kicking off. I think Ed pointed out that very accurately. So I mean, it's a reality that there are challenges and tensions in that transition period, that, a lot of things that were pushed away. I think Thomas Rosenberg was his name. He probably would know what I mean. Maybe you do too. Some things that were in our unconscious mind or space, they now surface in that transition, mostly in the form of fear, right? We can see that globally in most societies today. We can see that in organizations and on the individual level. So I think this is a pain and a tension that is very much correlating to that transition. So I'm a probably fundamental optimist. So I would say there is just one way, and it is progressing. And I think it's an unstoppable movement. I've just had a very nice conversation with a client today on the way to embrace Teal ways of working. And even though we were facing lots of challenges, and I'm not sure the organization will manage to actually embrace it as a whole system. What he said was, what you've done with us as a design team of 15 people, no one can ever take that away. It's a shift of consciousness. There is a spark. There's something ignited, a light that they have seen and felt, and there is no going back as such. So that made me extremely hopeful, even if the organizational level might revert back. And we've seen examples of that where holacracy was adopted and then they dismissed it. On the individual level, there is no going back. So once you've been exposed, you might become, your environment might change, but you will keep that inside you, and you might, might stay with that organization. Nevertheless, you might change. I think you can't take that away. So that's exciting. Clive, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just quickly in 8 seconds. I think the curve model is the wrong model. Has anybody read Strategy of the Dolphin by Cordis and Lynch? It's an oldie but a great. Strategy of the Dolphin by Cordis and Lynch, and it models with a wave, and Teal is now getting toward the top of the wave, and the model says as soon as you get to that perturbation loop, let go and rethink the way forward. So imagine the wave, top of the wave.
Well, that was the quickest 10 minutes of my life.
No, we were ready to get the punchline from Julian, and then it got cut off.
Julian, do you want to give us the punchline real quick?
We absolutely need to hear that.
It was just a little story of way back. I don't know whenever Teal landed in Holland, a bunch of people came together. I think they're now pretty well-established Teal Holland people. And they were sort of looking at this. But I was talking about complex human systems. Teal is all about complex human systems, and understanding the complexity of relationships within those human systems is key to most things. And they came to the conclusion that yeah, Teal is a great destination, but how the hell do we get there? From where I'm standing, Teal looks lovely, but the road is a pain in the neck. And they tell it was complex, and I have this reputation in this part of the world as being Mr. Complexity, and so they called me up. I did a three-day workshop on complex human systems for Teal people, which I thought was quite apt, really. And I'm not sure that the rest of Teal has really it got its head around that yet, and how do you navigate complexity? How do you navigate complex human systems? And because those relationships are the they will enable us to move through the various iterations that organizations and external systems will go through.
Well, it sounds like you all had as revelatory a breakout as my group did, and I would love to also invite everybody here to share, probably in the chat because we only have a few minutes left, but take a moment to write in the chat, what struck you, what excited you, what inspired you from your breakout, and what would you want to share with the rest of us? Teal is unstoppable. Love it. But yeah, what would you like to take away from that breakout? Just take a minute.
Matt and team, are we also just, Travis put the link in the chat. I think we're also planning to send an email, follow-up email. Will include our link to our report as well as the recording. Am I correct about that?
Yes, and also potentially a survey, since we started this under the auspices of Teal Around the World and the Teal Network. That's sort of gone away. What are we going to do as a Teal team with this structure in 2025? We may be looking for input on that as well.
Scoring a win in a chaotic world. Matt, I think you might have accidentally just sent your takeaway to me.
Yes, I just noticed that, and I'm happy to share it with you, Julia. But I think I can share it with other people too.
Yeah. Well, as you all are hopefully writing your takeaways in, I do want to thank you, and we will send a follow-up email. Hopefully the takeaways will make it into that email, at least those takeaways that have been shared before the next 2 minutes are up. But truly, I have been so inspired by just the excitement, the willingness to be here, to spend time with us, to be thoughtful and open about this report. Matt and Ed and Travis, so grateful to you for the countless hours you and the team have spent on creating this for the community and for posterity and for the foundation of hopefully next year's report as well. But please share with us your thoughts, your feedback, and most importantly, let's go out and be Teal, y'all. Keep driving it forward. We love to see it. Connect with all of us on the, on the various platforms, and hope to see you next time.
And Teal teamers, you want to stick around for a minute? If you can.
Farewell, everybody.